Hi, I'm Jennifer Simmons with AIM. Welcome to week 6 of the 2021 session of the Indiana General Assembly. We're back this week with another legislative update. We have the whole crew: Matt Greller, our CEO, Lindsay Moss, Campbell Ritchie, and Jenna Nupper. We're going to dive right in this week. The House Republicans released the biennium budget. There's a lot in there for municipalities, so don't always have a lot to talk about on the budget, but this year there's some good stuff. Matt, what's in there for cities?
Yeah, very good news, I think, from a city and town perspective. The budget we talked a little bit already this session about the governor's mention of a regional cooperative program of some sort, details to be determined, but the House funded that program to the tune of about $150 million, regional recovery program. My guess is it'll probably look something like regional cities did a few years ago, but obviously details still to be worked out. Also in the budget, $250 million for broadband expansion. Received a lot of attention over the last few months during the pandemic and the need for greater access. So that'll help, hopefully, our members, if not directly, the folks that live in cities and towns around the state that need better access to broadband services. So that's good. And then body cameras and policing issues in general have received obviously a lot of attention the last 7 or 8 months. The budget contains $10 million for body cameras, so for the acquisition of new cameras for police departments, et cetera. So that's all, I think, very positive news for local governments and cities and towns.
Yeah, as always, we'll be reading more thoroughly, looking for any landmines, anything in the budget that we don't want to see there. But for now, it's looking pretty good. So Campbell, Matt mentioned some broadband money in the House GOP budget. There are some broadband bills heard this week. Can you give us a little bit of update on those?
Yeah, the Senate Utilities Committee met this week on Thursday, and the chairman, Senator Cook, dubbed it Broadband Day. There were two large bills that dealt with the broadband grant funding that would be coming through the state that will somewhat work in conjunction with that budget item. So these bills are really focused on how you get data to target that and how those grants will be prioritized. And there's a lot of language there, a lot of moving parts. I'm assuming that by the end of the session, all of those bills and the budget will be in one conversation about how they're going to prioritize the budget, the broadband funding. Specific to cities and towns, there was another bill heard there, which is Senate Bill 359, which allows local units to enter into agreements with broadband providers to help them finance the projects in the communities where the units would issue debt on their behalf, and the developers would pay that debt back over time as they built out their project. And that was also passed out of that committee this week, and it provides another tool for communities to bring broadband into their communities in partnership with developers.
All right, thanks, Campbell. We've also had a pretty good week in terms of grassroots engagement. I know that's something that we've been really investing a lot of time on since transitioning from IAC to AIM, and we saw some really great progress there this week.
Yeah, so the approach that we've, I think, tried to take the last few years has been very targeted, very surgical, so that we are pairing up municipal members, council members, clerk treasurers, managers, mayors with individual members on a committee where we have a bill of importance. That happened at least three times this week. Welcome to the show. My dog just joined us. The joys of working from home during the pandemic. Anyway, that's been a real joy, I think, for us to see in effect or in action. It happened on House Bill 1114. It seems to have happened on House Bill 1116 and on Senate Bill 158. But two of the House bills that Jenna's been working on pretty extensively, House Bill 1114 and 1116.
Yeah, just to echo what Matt was saying, in so many meetings with legislators this week, they've referred back to conversations they've had with their mayors, their town managers, particularly on these two issues. So just want to say thank you again. It does matter. House Bill 1114 was the design standards bill. This has been on the third reading calendar all week, and we continue to hear that there's just not enough support to move it. So we'll continue to monitor it and keep you all updated if that changes. But for now, all signals point to it not moving forward this session. And then House Bill 1116, which was the PVC piping bill. It was scheduled to be heard in House Gov and Reg this week, but it was pulled from the calendar and it's not on next week's committee schedule. So again, thank you to our members who reached out to that on that. And then speaking of grassroots, House Bill 1498 is authored by Representative Doug Miller, and it deals with the publication of local government notices and newspapers. This passed out of Gov and Reg, I think last week or the week before. It was called down on a third reading vote, but failed due to lack of a constitutional majority. So it's not dead yet. It just didn't have enough votes to move forward. Just a reminder, this would allow locals, provide them the option to post notices online as opposed to paying for newspaper ads. I talked to Representative Miller this morning and he's interested in calling this back down next week. So we're going to need you to reach out to your legislators, maybe who voted no or who weren't present for the vote last week, because it was a close vote and we think there's potential for this bill to move forward.
All right, thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Matt. Lindsay, you've also been engaged on a bill very heavily this week, Senate Bill 158, where you've seen grassroots efforts also be beneficial. Ordinance violations bill, you want to give a little more info there?
Sure. Senate Bill 158 was a bill that it started out as a vehicle bill, but a couple of weeks ago it was moved out of the Senate Rules Committee and into local government with some new content, which essentially cut the maximum amount that local units of government can charge for an ordinance violation by 90%. So the current law is, the maximum is $2,500 for a first violation, up to $7,500 for subsequent violations. But that was cut to a max of $250 and a max of $750. And it also had some other language in there that anytime an apartment complex is cited for ordinance violations, you can only cite the apartment complex as a whole and not cite them for individual violations on a per unit basis. So that bill was on the local government calendar for this week and it was heard, but there was an amendment that stripped out all of that language. And I think that's in large part due to lack of support on the committee. And again, thank you to everyone who reached out to your senator who sits on that committee. We definitely think that language didn't have the support to move forward, and that's why it was stripped from the bill. We are keeping our eye out to make sure it doesn't land anywhere else, because technically the language is still alive, but definitely a good start that it had to be stripped from its original bill.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. So we're looking out also just from a process standpoint to give everybody an idea of how much time is left on the clock. One more week of committees, Lindsay?
Yes, that's right. The House deadline, I believe, is Tuesday and the Senate deadline is Thursday, but next week will be the last week for committee hearings in the first half.
Yeah, so a really busy week again next week. Just as always, we really encourage you to check out the bill tracking list at the bottom of legislative summary. Please watch your emails closely for any action alerts. We did have to send at least one last week and may have to do so in the coming week. So be sure to check your email, and we'll be back with you next week with another legislative summary video update. Thanks. Say hi, everybody.
Hi.
That was so bad. Sorry, we gotta start over.
And we're just sitting here and looking pretty like usual. Is that right?
Yep. Sorry. Was that pretty?
Oh,
All right.